Welcome folks, this is a video that I put together to highlight the outriggers for my Perception kayak. This is the Crank 10.0. It's a 10-foot kayak, so a little tippy, but really quite stable, and the outriggers are really only necessary if you plan on standing up in the kayak, or if you're in some pretty heavy duty water, some heavy waves. I'll walk through the how I constructed these and how they functioned and give you a brief description about how I use them. So stay tuned and enjoy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the specifics on how I put this together. The pontoons themselves are a piece of 4-inch ABS PVC, and these floats right here are your standard Cramp Pot Floats. Through the center, I have, in this section in here, I actually took a piece of it's molding that you can get at Home Depot. It's expanded PVC, so it's just PVC board, and I cut out circles that fit inside this section here to give it a little bit of rigidity, and you just glue those in with your standard PVC pipe glue. So in this section here we have a piece of that board, and also on here is a piece of that board with a hole drilled in the center, and then a PVC pipe that runs through the whole section with PVC end caps put on the ends, and that holds it all in place. These Cramp Pot Floats had to be milled down a little bit to get them to fit inside the 4-inch ABS coupler here. And the way that I did that is I put it on the lathe and used a rasp to sand that section down so it fit inside. And then I also glued it with standard PVC glue. I thought it would melt the foam, but it didn't. So milled that down, pushed them both in, glued them in good, put the PVC pipe through, put the end caps on. And that held it all in place. And then I also filled the center section here with great stuff foam sealant. So that's all filled in there as well. So I don't have to worry about that filling up with water. So that's the essentials on how the pontoons worked. And then I worked out through some measurements and videos about where the water line would be on the kayak, approximately the height that I wanted them. And then I cut out PVC pipe to adjust it to the dimensions for this particular kayak. That's why I can't really give you a cut list on this. But I can tell you that there's a short piece of ABS 2-inch pipe here. I think that's 20 degrees, and another one of those. And they are glued together with a short piece of 2-inch pipe as well, and then a straight shot all the way across the kayak. This section here is another 90-degree T coupler that comes off to 1.5-inch PVC pipe. And I did that so that I could rotate the pontoons, and I'll show you how that all worked as well. And then again, repeat it on the other side. Now, the critical component about setting all this up is that the pontoons have to be in line with the direction of the kayak. And so in order to get these to all rotate in the correct location, I put a really short piece of ABS pipe between the two pontoons so that they were essentially constructed right next to each other. So as I glued these guys up, I could make sure that they were identical to both sides and that they both were running true parallel to each other. And that made things a whole lot easier, and I also confirmed it when I glued them in. I put a line on the floor so I could use it as a visual aid to understand that I did in fact glue these up so that they were parallel to the kayak. So that's the pontoon portion. That's how that part was constructed. Now the design of this, the way that I did it is I wanted it to be able to take these out of the water when I didn't need that extra stability. So when I was traveling long distances with my pedal drive, I wanted to be able to just take these guys out of the water and be able to pedal and do it quickly. So to do that, I set it up to rotate it, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This guy right here is a PVC coupler that fit over the top of a standard I believe it was 1-inch PVC Schedule 40 pipe. And I glued that to another piece of PVC pipe on the inside, and then from there I glued that to the PVC board that I talked about. You can get that at Lowe's, Home Depot, that PVC molding, and it's just expanded PVC board. Now what I can do from my seat, I've removed the seat so that it's easier to see everything that's going on, but from my seat I can turn around and I can loosen this guy here, and it runs on a track, this aluminum track here, and I can slide that out, and now it's no longer connected to the pontoon structure. And I'll do that to the other side as well, and you can see that it just bounced, it came loose, and so now I can rotate the whole unit up and it will be completely out of the way. And that was my idea, and it's relatively quick. I can go from pontoons in the water to pontoons out of the water in about 30 seconds. So to put it back, and by the way, it will stay in the up position relatively easily. Gravity holds them in place, so I don't need to do anything from a structural standpoint to hold those in the up position. They stay in the up position on their own. Okay, and then when I'm ready to stand up and fish again, I can rotate these back, and I reach back and push these guys in, and now I'm floating and in the up position. So you just slide those guys in, and then you can see that I flared this end out here a little bit, a lot like you do rod holders. I flared that end out a little bit, so it's just easier to get that in there. So once that's in there, I just tighten it back down, and we're in business. That's not going anywhere. And I do the same to the other side. And now I'm back in business. And again, I can do this from my seat, and relative safety, it works fine. I've done it dozens of times. So that's how the functionality of the pontoons work. Now, there's going to be cases where, actually, I should mention that these guys here were a separate unit. I bought those off of Amazon. Yeah, I think I got those on Amazon. Yeah, I got those on Amazon, and they come with 1/4 bolts included. So the idea here is that there will be situations where I won't need the pontoon anymore, right? Where I'm going to be on flat glass-like water, and I should be able to navigate just fine without flipping over. So in those cases, I might want to be able to work without the pontoon. It's easy enough the way that I set this up. Again, I use that same PVC board here, and we'll zoom in again so we can see how that works a little bit. So I use that same PVC board here, and I created a hinge with it that bolts down. So with the unscrewing of these two hand screws on this side and on the other side, and you can see that they're not going to accidentally come up from the unscrewing portion. Then when I can rotate those up, and once those are up, I can take the whole pontoon off and set that aside. So it's relatively easy to use the kayak without the pontoons and to use it with the pontoons. So that's essentially how the pontoons function. I will tell you that it works really well on the water. One of the things that a lot of videos don't show you is how the kayak functions in the water with the pontoons. I can tell you it works fantastic, but I can also tell you that the videotaping in water, if you don't have a waterproof camera, is a little bit sketchy. So I haven't done that. I hope to be able to do that so that you have an idea of how it works. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the board in the center here that holds the unit up. Again, it's that same PVC molding that you can get at Home Depot, Lowe's. I drilled holes in it and put in 1-inch rod holders. I used a sprinkler pipe because it's got a thinner wall, so I have a larger interior opening. And I use the smaller ones because the rods don't jiggle around in there as much. And I have found that nearly every rod that I own easily fits in there. This is one of the larger ones that I have, and it easily fits in there. So the rod holders work fantastic. And if you have larger rods, you can use the larger 1.5 inch ABS plastic. That works really well as well. The metal track that I'm using here to hold everything is actually part of a parking barrier gate arm. I work in the parking industry, so we run across scrap stuff like this all the time. So I use that, cut a slot in it, and I use that as my track to hold it in. Now, the way that is connected is on the end where all of the torque and weight is located. There's a 3/16 inch piece of aluminum threaded in there with 4 bolts about 6 inches apart that bolt the whole unit on there, so impossible to go anywhere, extremely strong. And I did that because I wanted to make sure there weren't any issues with the connection portion down in here. This section back here is put on with 4 standard screws. Well, they're plastic screws with raised threads, so that's held in there relatively tight as well. There's a couple of videos that explain how you can get a plate inside and bolt to it using string pulls, which is how I did it, and I'll link to that video if I can find it again. That's how these guys are mounted. One thing I will mention though is that these guys, in order for the rotation part to work correctly and to be able to slide these units in and out, it has to be perpendicular to the shaft of your outriggers. So it's got to be on there in parallel with the two units have to be mounted in parallel, so that as you rotate it around and you slide these guys in and out, they slide in and out correctly. So that's the aluminum part. The hinges were also made up of the PVC board and an aluminum extrusion U-channel. I think that's all the parts. These guys here are 1/4 bolts that I just stuck through a piece of aluminum tubing. So that's how I created those hand wheels. These guys are a piece of 3/16 aluminum plate underneath. I'll pull one of those off so you can see it. So it's a plate here. It's got a carriage bolt in there, and I just filed out this section in here so that holds relatively square, and then I pulled it down really tight, and you can see I put a nut on the inside there to hold the 1/4 bolt in place. So this can't rotate because of the carriage bolt has that square end on it. So it can't rotate. So when I tighten it down, I don't have to worry about this moving around or rotating or binding up in the center. So that's how that guy was all put together, and you can see it's just a 1/4 bolt that goes through the center there. And so he just slides into that track, into the unit, tighten it down, and this unit from here and the hinge is now completely secured on the boat. It can't go anywhere. One of the things that I noticed on a lot of the pontoons that I looked at on YouTube before I got started here was that they were incredibly flimsy. And these guys, although they can flex a little bit, they're relatively sturdy in comparison to the other units that I saw. And because they're connected to all the way across the boat, they're integrated into the structure of the boat, it's a lot more sturdy, and it really, really stabilizes the boat. There you go. If you have any questions, write them in the comments down below.